showtime, folks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been 5 months since I've made a Better Call Saul video. 5 months!
What a sick joke!
That's a long time for me not to have talked about my favorite show on earth. I love the show, and as a matter of fact, there are so many episodes of it that I can't really make a top 5 list of them. I'm gonna try to in this video, but really, I'm not gonna lie, of all the top 5 videos I've ever made, this is the hardest. There are so many episodes of Better Call Saul that I truly love. I could have easily made this a top 20 episodes, or a top 15, or a top 10, blah, 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 but I landed on 5. These are the best episodes that I think ever existed in Better Call Saul, or really, I guess, like the Breaking Bad universe, because if you guys know, Better Call Saul is my favorite of the two. I think Breaking Bad's phenomenal. I really do. It's a great show. Better Call Saul wouldn't exist without it. It's just, I personally prefer the slower storytelling that is Better Call Saul. I love Jimmy McGill. I love Chuck McGill. I love Nacho. I love Howard. I love Kim. All those characters didn't exist in Breaking Bad, and yeah, Breaking Bad had Jesse, Hank, all those people and stuff like that, but just something with the dynamic in Better Call Saul worked better for me. I know that's different for everyone, but that's why there's different flavors of ice cream. I just want to jump right in at this point because we got a lot to talk about. So these are my top 5 favorite episodes of Better Call Saul, starting with number 1, Plan and Execution. It's season 6, episode 7. This episode in particular just did everything right, and it made me feel
like a piece of shit!
Every single emotion on planet Earth. From moments where I was cracking up, moments I felt awkward, moments I was mad at our characters, moments I was happy at our characters, moments I was pretty much on the verge of tears, moments where I couldn't believe what I'd seen, and it left me scarred forever. It had everything. This episode followed the plan and literal execution of Howard Hamlin. This was all the buildup that we saw for really, it was since season 5, but really all of the show of Kim and Jimmy's scheming, and it exploded in a way that none of us could have imagined. I don't think it really needs much of an explanation. If you've seen Better Call Saul, you know this episode. This is like the Ozymandias, if I must say, of Better Call Saul. It's that good. From the beginning shots of Jimmy and Kim's plan working brilliantly to the end when Howard Hamlin came in, addressed the situation, and Lalo showed up, the boogeyman, you know what I mean? Everything just worked so well. It kept you on the edge of your toes the entire time, and it was so special. And I'll never forget when I watched this episode for the first time. My dad was still catching up on the show, so he didn't see this yet, and I was ahead of him. So when I watched it in my room on these monitors that I'm using to record this video, but when I watched it in my room, I was left like shocked, jaw dropped at my screen for like 10 minutes. And I remember that night after watching the episode and watching the cliffhanger that we got, because if you guys binged the show, you wouldn't know, but if you watched it live, you know that there was like a 6-week hiatus after this episode because of Bob Odenkirk's heart attack. They had to delay filming, so delayed editing, blah, blah, blah. So there was a 6-week hiatus after this episode aired, unfortunately, but the cliffhanger that this episode ended on of Howard Hamlin getting shot and Lalo just being like, shh, let's talk. It was just insane. And it literally, I'm not kidding, it kept me up at night. I made a video all about this in the past, but that scene alone in Howard Hamlin's death was... It felt so real. It felt like a live leak. Like it was so insane to watch on screen. It was scarring. It really was, because it looked visually so real. It felt real. The way he, hit his head and all that stuff. It was disgusting, and it felt so real. But also because this was a character that was so real. He felt the whole time just so grounded in people you and I know in the real world. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel like someone who would have died on a TV show. So when it happened, it was shocking because the guy was literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. And on top of it, you feel all the emotions with him of everything that Jimmy and Kim did to him. It was just so well told. This was a moment where it was just bravo Vince all again, bravo Peter Gould, bravo everyone who worked on this episode, all the writers, Tom Schnoz, who I think wrote this episode if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but it doesn't matter. Whoever did write this episode did a killer job. All the actors who acted in this episode did an even better job. This solidifies everything done right in the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul universe, period. Everything was right. The cinematography, the color grading, the acting, the writing, everything worked here. And not only that, the whole scene, the whole beginning scene with the actual plan Jimmy and Kim had, that was great. Even the beginning of the episode where they were devising the scheme and they realized that the judge or the mediator, I forget his name, they realized he had a broken arm, so they had to fix that. It all worked. The music told it so well. It was so good. It really was. How could you not have this on a top 5 list? I know I'm rambling too much, but it was that good, and I can't believe I put that at number 1 because, I feel like I could talk about that one forever. But, yeah, you're going to see that not all, but season 6 was just the best season of Better Call Saul. It really was, and I'm glad because a lot of shows don't have a killer final season. Coincidentally, Vince Gilligan made 2 shows that had banger final seasons, but whatever. The next episode on this list is Saul Gone, and that is season 6, episode 13. So it's the final episode of the show. The only, I guess, setback for me with this episode was it was in black and white, and that's really not a setback at all, but it's one of those things that just kind of irks me because I love color. I'm so used to color, so when you have something that isn't and it's out of your comfort zone, it's, it messes with your head a little bit, but whatever. I don't really give a shit because the episode was so good, and if that's my only complaint, I gotta go kick rocks or something. This episode was amazing. It was such a phenomenal way to wrap up the show. It really was, and I guess it wasn't what I had in mind for, how they were going to wrap up Jimmy McGill's story and Kim Wexler and all that. I remember when this episode was coming out and the whole show overall, there was just so many theories online for how it was going to end. No one knew, but that was the beauty of Better Call Saul, is the writers were so good. Every theory would have worked. There wasn't really a bad way to go about it. Yeah, it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it surpassed my expectations. Just like how, in a lot of ways, the reunion of Rick and Michonne in The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, was better than I expected, blah, 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 all that stuff. This is one of those examples where the writers knew what we wanted, said, fuck that, we're doing what we want for these characters because it's what would actually happen. You know what I mean? What they did worked. It's like Apple products. I don't know, I'm nerding out, but it worked so goddamn well. Every bit of it, whether it was Saul switching back into Slippin' Jimmy mode, where he was out lawyering the lawyers there, getting down to 7 years and all of that stuff. All of that stuff was so good, and the return of Marie Schrader was so good, but really what solidified this episode for me was from the moment they got in the courtroom to the moment where it pans away and the episode ends. All of that was so fucking stellar. I could go back and watch it a million times and never ever get sick of it. From Jimmy McGill's monologue, where he rights all of his wrongs, admits to everything, calls himself Jimmy McGill at the end of it all. It was just so fitting for the universe. It worked so goddamn well. It's so hard to avoid, man. It's so hard to avoid. It was so good. In a lot of ways, I don't think it was necessarily better than Breaking Bad's ending, but in a lot of ways it was on the same level and had things I liked a lot more than it. So yeah, I don't know if it was better, but it was just as good and more satisfying in a lot of ways because we finally got closure in the Breaking Bad universe once and for all. At this point in the story, every loose end was wrapped up, even things we didn't think were loose ends, like all of the little details in Breaking Bad, all of those characters that we didn't know what happened to, everything just got wrapped up brilliantly, even Skylar and all of that stuff. It's just this episode put a bow on all of it, and it really made you realize that that Saul, or Jimmy, was actually like the big bad of the Breaking Bad universe if you really think about it. Yeah, in a lot of ways, obviously, he's no Walter White. Like, he wasn't that evil, but he devised everything in such a way that none of this would have happened if it was just Walter White or Jesse acting alone. You needed Saul to have bridged the gap for all of the atrocities in the show to happen. And I like that this episode told that in such a way that it didn't feel like they were trying to force Saul as this bad guy. It felt so natural. And when you leave the episode, you're like, oh, I guess Saul really was like the big bad. You know what I mean? Like, I like that they did that. And I like that they made Saul both redeemable, unforgivable, and yet in a way where you ended the show completely satisfied with what happened. Because he ratted himself out. He still gets to see Kim and here and there. And yeah, he's back to 86 years in jail, but at least he's in jail where people respect him and all that stuff. Like, everything just worked. The only thing I didn't really like about the episode, I liked it, but it took me out of it a little bit, was when Saul was on the way to jail and everyone was like, hey, it's Better Call Saul, and they did the chant. Like, that was a little goofy to me. It didn't really feel like Better Call Saul, but at the same time, I liked it. I'm glad they did it. But this is an episode that I could go back to time and time again and never ever get sick of. It really is just that good. I love it so much, and I love talking about these two episodes, as you could tell. But we're going to shift gears entirely here, and we are going to go all the way back to season 1, episode 6 for this entry number 3, and that's the episode titled 5-0. Because guess what? Mike Ehrmantraut is in this story too. Did you forget? I kind of did, talking about Saul this whole time, but if we look at it objectively, Better Call Saul is just as much a story about Mike Ehrmantraut's side of the equation and how that whole cartel storyline came to be. And 5-0 is the episode that told the backstory of what made Mike Ehrmantraut Mike Ehrmantraut. It's so amazing, from, his monologues in the episode to just what we got with the flashbacks with Mike and the Philly cops and all of that. It was so good. And man, what is his name? Jonathan Banks, I think his name is. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm drawing a blank. I don't have a script for this video, but his monologue at the end of the episode about how he broke his boy and all of that stuff is just one of the best monologues in Breaking Bad's universe overall. It's some of the best acting we got from Jonathan Banks. It's some of the best performance we've seen out of the show, and it was very early on. It was right over the hump of, before I started watching Better Call Saul, like, officially. I saw the first couple episodes and didn't like them. This episode was right over the hump where it started to get good, and I wish I just stuck to this episode in my first time trying to watch the show, but hey, I'm here now making videos about it now because I love it that much, but whatever. This is probably the best episode in season 1. It's definitely the only episode in season 1 on my top 5 list, but objectively speaking, this is the one that made Better Call Saul so special as it is, because you could have these deep dives into characters that aren't super duper action packed, but are just really good drama, really good storytelling, and this just had it all. I loved the flashbacks we got. I loved Jonathan Banks' monologues overall, and just what it did for Mike Ehrmantraut as a character. It gave him humanity. It really did, and it did it all in such a way. And yeah, I don't have as much to say about this episode as the others, but it's stuck with me the most. It was one of these 5 that just really has a special place in my heart, and one I go back to all the time because it really is that good. But anyway, number 4, Jesus, on this list is, I think, the best episode of the show, point blank period, and that's Chicanery, season 3, episode 5. What can I say about Chicanery that hasn't already been said? This is the courtroom episode between Jimmy and Chuck, and it just all explodes in such a dramatic, beautiful way that, oh man, it just made the show so special. This was like, there's a moment in every show for everyone where you're like, oh my god, this is just so good, and this episode, I think, did it universally for everyone. This was such an incredible moment in TV history. I think one of the best episodes of TV, period, with that explosive battery sequence and Chuck's whole just breakdown to Jimmy. It just perfectly sums up what made the show so good, good, and it's why I made a whole video deep diving how really, if you think about it, Chuck is kind of like the big bad of the show, even though it's definitely, Jimmy McGill himself that's the big bad. Man, this is just such a good episode of TV. There isn't a moment of it where I'm not on the edge of my seat just waiting for what happens next. Everything, every single element of this goddamn episode worked so well, just on all fronts. It was just so good. I don't really know what more to say about it that hasn't already been said, because it's just that strong. It really is. I love Jimmy, and I love Jimmy and Chuck episodes, period, and I just loved what this did for both of their characters. It was acted brilliantly. It was shot brilliantly. There wasn't a second of time that wasn't spent well in this episode, and from what Legal Eagle talks about, apparently this was very accurate to what courtrooms are really like, especially for these bar disciplinary hearing courts and things like that and all of that. This was just well done on every front. This was a bravo Vince moment. But I can't go on too much longer about it. You guys know this is the best episode, or one of the best episodes. You know it's all been said. I don't know what else to say. So we're going to end this top 5. We're going to talk about my extended list and runners-up after, but we're going to end this top 5 of like the biggest, the best ones for me with Season 4, Episode 10, titled Winner. This episode was, it was just so good. It was the reinstatement of Jimmy McGill as, DBA Saul Goodman, and it was just well done. This episode just had so much going for it, whether it was the Werner Ziegler side of things, the Lalo side of things, or Jimmy getting reinstated as Saul Goodman and Associates, and even the flashback with Chuck. It just had everything I love about Better Call Saul in one episode, and it was just explosive. I know there's a lot of people out there that make lists of their favorite episodes of Better Call Saul, and they put this as their favorite. I don't know if I could say that it's my personal favorite. I think that goes to chicanery, like I already mentioned, but it's in my top 5. It's one of my 5 best favorite episodes of the show, but it just had everything I love about the show in one episode, like I already mentioned, whether it was the drama that came with the Werner Ziegler side of things and Mike Ehrmantraut and how he had to kill one of his friends, or how Lalo broke in and was hunting down Werner Ziegler and then he killed the guy. It had those moments because Lalo finally came into the picture and this big boogeyman. It was just so great to see. But it also had drama between Kim and Jimmy with that whole thing, and the way it ended where the camera panned after he said it's all good, man. Like, oh my God, that's some of the best Bravo Vince you got. Like, really, it's so good. It's so damn good. And this is another one where it's like, I don't know what else to really say that hasn't been said. It's just everything worked. This was a lightning caught in a bottle episode. It really was. Just everything worked about it. It was so good, and I love the flashback that we got in the beginning with Chuck and Jimmy, the whole winner takes it all thing, that whole karaoke and them just, bonding and stuff like that. It showed that it wasn't always bad between them. They had moments where they did really love each other like brothers, but it never shined through. And I like how this episode really did a good juxtaposition with that, to how their relationship was so strayed by the end of the episode, and what all unfolded led to Jimmy becoming Saul Goodman. This was that episode. This was that episode that put Saul as Saul. This was that episode that really drew the line for Mike Ehrmantraut. It was the episode that really felt like the penultimate episode to the early salad days of Better Call Saul, if that makes any sense. I don't know if my wording there even worked, but do you understand what I mean? Like, this was that big episode that changed everything, and I loved it for that. But yeah, that is my top 5 list. I don't know what else to say about Winner that hasn't already been said. I want to give my extended top 10 and then some runners up, because like I said, it is literally impossible to make a video that just has 5. Those are definitively my 5 best, but these additional 5 that I'm about to mention are also in that list. I'm not not going to go into them. I'm just going to name them because they are also in my favorites, and those are Season 2, Episode 7, which is Inflatable. That's the episode where Jimmy gets fired from Davis and Maine, which was a great episode. Then it was Pimento, Season 1, Episode 9, just another phenomenal episode. Bad Choice Road, which was Season 5, Episode 9. Bad Choice Road was teeter-tottering being in my top 5 throughout the entire time of planning this video, because that is just such a fucking phenomenal episode. That's why it's literally impossible to have a top 5, but whatever. Bad Choice Road was like that one that was right on the edge of being in it. Then we have Something Stupid, which is Season 4, Episode 7, and Fun and Games, which is Season 6, Episode 9. And I don't want to go too deep into any of these, but the one thing I have to say about Fun and Games, it was the series finale to Better Call Saul, period. Whereas the series finale to the show, which is Season 6, Episode 13, Saul Goodman, which we already talked about, that was the finale of the Breaking Bad universe. So that's a little different. But Fun and Games wrapped up Better Call Saul. You know what I mean? Like, it wrapped up the true nature of the Jimmy and Kim story, and it did so brilliantly. And the way it just ended, where you see the back of Jimmy's head while Jimmy and Kim are breaking up, and then it cuts to Saul. Such a fucking amazing moment. It really was just so absolutely incredible. And then these are the last ones. I just have to mention these before we go. There's some runners up because, like I said a million times, it's impossible to make a list this small for Better Call Saul. But those are Point and Shoot, Season 6, Episode 8, Bagman, Season 5, Episode 8, Rock and a Hard Place, Season 6, Episode 3, Breaking Bad, Season 6, Episode 11, and Waterworks, Season 6, Episode 12. So again, plot twist here, Season 6 has the best episodes. Like, all of the episodes are incredible, but my god, it is so hard. It was so hard to make this video, but I would love to know your top 5 down in the comments, so go ahead, post them away. I can't wait to hear from you. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.